Hello, and welcome to the My Father Said podcast, where we discuss all things faith, finance, and family. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan. I'm both a father and a son.
Hey everyone, I'm Robert. I am Ryan's dad, and I myself am my father's son. And we are pleased to have with us today this young lady sitting to my right. We're going to allow Kelly to introduce herself.
I'm Kelly Burnside Law Firm, and I am a mother and a daughter.
All right.
Now, you may have just heard us say law firm. And for our biblical believers out there in podcast land, you may know that Scripture talks about lawsuits. In particular, it speaks about not suing someone else. So you might be wondering, why does Ryan and Robert have today a lawyer on the set for this podcast? Well, the reason is really simple. Scripture teaches a lot of things about lawsuits, and it says that we ought not sue one another, because that's destructive to our witness, especially if it's one believer pursuing a lawsuit against another believer. We should be able to settle our differences as Christians in a manner that would be pleasing to God. However, that doesn't always work. And sometimes the person who calls themselves a believer, or maybe even an unbeliever altogether, just doesn't want to participate and settle something the way it should be rightfully. Proverbs 31, 8 through 9 says the following. It says, "Speak up for those who cannot speak up for themselves. For the rights of all who are destitute, speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy." So in essence, sometimes we need a Kelly Burnside in our lives. Sometimes we need that advocate to come in and speak on our behalves on things that we just are not aware of. Things like the nuances inside your homeowner's policy or inside your automobile policy, or just laws that we don't even know exist. A little bit about Kelly, if I can, to bring on some. Kelly has just been nominated, and Kelly, I'm going to read this because I can't say all this. The 2024 South Carolina Rising Stars list basically means the following. It's a list that basically it's an exclusive list. It recognizes no more than 2.5% of attorneys in the state. And to be eligible for the Rising Stars list, a candidate must be either 40 years old or younger, or have been in practice for 10 years or less. And attorneys are selected from more than 70 practice areas and all firm sizes, assuring a credible, relevant annual list. The list, how did it go about it? Well, it's peer nominations. Mm-hmm. And of course, when your peers are nominating you, that alone says something. There's also an independent research by something called super lawyers. I guess they wear capes. I don't know.
Sounds made up.
Yeah. And then there's evaluations from a highly credentialed panel of attorneys. So getting on this list is not a slam dunk. Mm-hmm. There's obviously some competition involved. And we're proud to say that Kelly with Burnside Law has met that criteria.
Yeah. And she's also, not only was she nominated for that, she's also been nominated for the Best of Columbia for a full service law firm. So after this podcast, if you know Kelly, or if you've had the pleasure of working with Kelly, feel free to go and actually cast your vote for her on the Best of Columbia. And you can do that at, get this, bestofcolumbia.com. It's going to be pretty hard to forget where to find that. Thank you, Scott. Yep, look at that. They are cheering for Kelly. So there you go. But yeah. And so with that, we will jump into the podcast today. And our big question is, what happens when life throws you a legal curveball?
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I think Kelly might get some votes too if she actually survives this podcast. All right. I think that might work.
She's actually actively losing votes for being on this.
Yeah. Kelly's right now. She's thinking, I gave up my afternoon to come here and do this. I don't believe this. But anyway, Kelly, we want to ask some serious questions, because obviously what Ryan and I are doing in our careers and our profession, we are helping people accumulate and plan strategically for their financial future, what that might be. Mm-hmm. And the only areas that we're really competent in when it comes to doing that are the areas that we're trained in, the areas that we live in. We know that things happen, that curveball comes, and we know that my gosh, I hit a car or a car hits me. Somebody gets hurt at my house or I get hurt at someone's house. This building right here alone by itself that we're in, something were to happen, who is ultimately financially responsible for that? And to what extent will that or could that possibly affect all of the planning that I have put in place for years leading up to this point? Could something come out of left field and completely throw that off the guardrails? So we wanted to come in today, and we asked you to come in because basically we think our listeners would benefit from knowing that attorneys are not ambulance chasers. Or I should say the ethical, honest attorneys are not ambulance chasers. They are individuals that, as the Bible teaches us, that we surround ourselves with wise counsel. Right. It's never a bad idea to have an attorney on your side who you could reach out to and ask questions for, and if it gets to that point, to represent you in the court of which you don't know how to represent yourself. So with that in mind, we're just going to throw some questions at you and let you help us, help our listeners. And I'm going to go ahead and say right now, before we go too further in this.
Yeah. Look out for this clown. He's going to ask some questions. Did I take the words out of your mouth?
You certainly did, and I hope you listened to that. Okay. So, Kaylee, let's start with this one right here. Attorneys, in general, what type of issues or cases do personal injury attorneys handle?
Right. So personal injury attorneys, we handle injuries to the body, to the mind, emotions, rather than to the property. These cases are car wreck cases, premise liability, which is like your slip and fall case. Also includes workplace accidents and medical malpractice as well.
Slip and falls, work case. So an illustration of a slip and fall, I'm walking in a grocery store. I see a sparkling section on that aisle, say aisle 7. And I happen to have my foot in it, and next thing you know, I'm laying on my back. Is that what we're talking about?
Did you see the liquid before you fell?
Oh, now you're going to put criteria and conditions on it.
Well, it matters.
Oh, it does matter.
It does
that's
matter.
good. That's good to know. That's good to know. So basically, if it's the purest of accidents, you're saying that if I seen the water and if I went over and I stood in it, looked around to my left and right to see if anybody was watching and then went, oops, and hit the ground, that's really not a case.
It's not. In most grocery stores, supermarkets, they're going to have video footage to show that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I think I just heard Kelly not say, but underlining, is if you see water from a distance, don't look left and right, just go straight to it and fall. Yes. I think that's what I just heard.
So the camera on that aisle only picks you up walking, not you noticing it a couple aisles before. You go. Look at that. Financial tips with the Templetons. We are trying to help you build wealth one lawsuit at a time.
Yeah, I believe those votes for you are going through the ceiling right now after the first question. Oh, man. Everybody's going to love Kelly.
So here's a question about that. I know we're joking. Have you ever personally been involved with something where you were thinking, okay, this is probably a fake, like they nothing really happened or anything like that?
Not really. I really try to intake my cases and get all the evidence not get all the evidence, but intake it and try to determine whether I think the person, is being truthful and whether it could have happened before I, sign them up.
Okay, cool.
So do people actually come in with phony situations trying to pull one over on the system?
I'm sure there are people that do. Luckily, I haven't had it in a while, so I've kind of learned to weed them out.
Okay. That was funny because, that's not funny. This morning coming into work with the drive with the weather like it is, I was coming off of the road I was onto the on ramp off of 321 and getting on the Casey on ramp. And as I come around on the on ramp right up at the top, there were 2 cars sitting there without a police car there, but an ambulance was there. And as I come by each car, I looked and I couldn't see a dent or a scratch on either car, but someone in the front car was in the ambulance and the people in the back car were just standing up talking to each other. And I remember driving off thinking, I don't know what they could have hurt because I seen no dents, but I saw an ambulance.
Do you remember we were going to see you one day for a 1-to-1? We were driving and we saw that car flipped over on its side and that girl got up and walked out.
Yeah.
That is wild. That car was on the roof and she got out of that car and walked off.
Yeah. Yeah, she crawled. She got her right away. Kelly, you had no idea we were going this direction, did you? Yeah.
All right, so moving on to another question. How important is representation? Like, why should someone go work with Kelly as opposed to, hey, I got hurt, I know I got hurt, I'm not going to pay these lawyer fees, I'm going to go do this by myself?
Yes, well, lawyers are very familiar with the players in the process involving a personal injury case. There's multiple options on what venue to file a lawsuit in. There's also some coverage options, even different defendants to make sure you have all the parties that are added to the case is important as well. So a good lawyer will guide you through the process, provide you advice, and help you achieve the best possible results.
So we're under the assumption that our insurance providers are on our side. I mean, after all, they're covering us. Mm-hmm. I want to say this the right way. Should we just assume that our providers who are covering us, the numbers that we're seeing on our policy, if something, heaven forbid, were to happen, those are the numbers that we would receive, or do we actually have to?
No. So it depends on who's at fault. Mm-hmm. And so the liability insurance goes with the person that's at fault. It has nothing to do with your coverage. So if you have underinsurance, then that would kick in. But the liability coverage is whoever was at fault in the accident.
But as far as the coverage amount, say I've got $100,000 coverage on said item and said item took place, do I get $100,000 or do I get up to $100,000 or how does that work?
So most people are very confused about this. They believe if they have $100,000 in liability on their policy that if they're in a wreck, they're covered for $100,000. That's not true. That means that if you are at fault, you have $100,000 for the other person mm-hmm. that could collect that up to that amount depending on their medical bills, lost wages, their pain and suffering and things like that. But that $100,000 in liability doesn't protect you. It actually protects the driver you hit.
Well, what protects me on my policy?
Your underinsurance.
My underinsurance.
Not hitting anybody.
Yeah. That's always probably a good starting place. But in the event I did hit somebody, so yeah, that's pretty interesting. So it's good to have an attorney that can come and say, hey, Robert, this is what you need to know as it relates to not only your policy, but I would think that policies across issuers are pretty consistent one with the other. So whatever type of coverages I have, this other person's policies would offer the same or similar type coverages. Would that be a correct assumption?
No, a lot of people on the road only have minimum coverage. So they're only going to have $25,000 in liability coverage. So if someone else is at fault and they hit you, you're likely that they're only going to have $25,000 in liability. Now that's not always the case. You can get cases where there's $100,000 in liability, but I would say the majority of the cases that I see, the people have $25,000 in liability coverage. So I would want my client to have that underinsurance protection that would kick in after we get the first $25,000 in liability.
So why do you think that is? Why do you think a person only has the minimum and not a higher number?
I really wonder that because it's really not that expensive to add coverage. Mm-hmm. But I think that people, if they're doing it online maybe and not using an agent for insurance, no one's really explaining it to them. What it means, and then that's the cheapest coverage they can get is just those basic $25,050 in limits with no underinsurance. It's to increase your coverage. Of course, it depends on everybody's unique. You'd have to talk to an insurance agent to do that. But in my experience, it's not a whole lot more to increase those limits.
All right. Is it a fair question, Ryan? I know you can jump in anytime you want, but is it a fair question from me to you to ask, in the cases that you have seen settled, what percentage of the minimum coverage has been appropriate for the settlement?
I would say at least 70% have minimum coverage.
And that minimum would have been enough to meet the damages?
Oh, no. No, probably only 50% of the time is it. I mean, you just think about hospital bills these days are, it's hard to go to the hospital and not have a bill, $5,000 or $10,000. And then if they need orthopedic, if they break a bone, I mean, you're talking easily, over that $25,000.
Wow.
And the important thing also is remember with $25,000, it's $50,000 total. So if you have 4 people in your vehicle, y'all are all splitting that $50,000 between all 4 people. So it's $25,000 per person or $50,000 per accident. So that $50,000 can go really quick if you've got a family of 4 in a vehicle.
All right. What if the accident didn't happen in a vehicle, it happened on a property? Is it the same similar
No,
type
you're
thing?
going to have probably $1 million limits, or at least $100,000, $300,000, depending on the property.
Okay.
With a premise liability, it's a commercial policy normally. Now, not on a house, but even with the house, it's going to be more than those $25,000 limits.
So let's say someone gets hurt, whether it's a slip and fall at a store, or it's a car accident, or it's something that happens on somebody's property. How do they have to pay you before your services are rendered, or how does that work? Do people have to come up with funds?
No, I take everything on a contingency when it comes to personal injury. And so I get paid when they get paid. And then if I don't collect from them, they don't owe me anything.
Okay. Is that the way the majority of
most personal injury, now med mal is a little bit different. But most personal injury, yes.
Okay.
Med malpractice?
Medical malpractice, yes.
Okay. So that's an entirely different
That's a whole different kind of beast, yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's pretty good. Well, as we look at this, we talk about negligence. But what is negligent? You remember when Bill Clinton said years ago, it all depends on what the definition of is? So what about the definition of negligence? What's the legal definition of negligence, which puts somebody either responsible for the damages or not responsible for the damages?
So negligence is just the failure to use reasonable care resulting in damages to somebody else. So reasonable care is kind of your standard there.
All right. I've got a pool. I don't want to use that example. That one's going to be bad. I got a vacant parking lot, and I don't know, kids are out there running around. Somebody hits a pothole and breaks their ankle. They were trespassing. Am I negligent, or are they trespassing?
So you'd probably want to get a parking lot expert to determine if they're negligent or not. I've had parking lot cases before. It really depends. With the parking lot, if you have like the white lines, and maybe there's a hole in the white line and you really can't see it, would a reasonable person fall in that? Yes, maybe. Especially if they're getting out of the car, they wouldn't see the hole because the white line kind of camouflages that. That would be, yes, negligent. Or I would argue that was negligent. But just kids running, it depends on the condition of the parking lot. There's a lot more that goes into it.
Okay.
And did you have no trespassing signs up? I mean, there's a lot,
So and I don't know if you can answer this question, but here in Columbia, South Carolina, what would be a typical, hey, this is a negligence case that we see, this is the kind of the parameters that were around it?
Well, the most that I see are car wreck cases. So when you are driving in a car, you are supposed to use reasonable care and follow the laws of the road. And so when you don't use reasonable care and you do something that a normal person or reasonable person would do, then you are negligent.
Okay, that makes sense.
Boy, we could run down this trail all day long. So I have this large field in front of my house that I purchased. Okay. And it's not connected to my primary property, but it's not part of my primary property, but it's connected to my primary property.
Okay.
And sometimes I look out in that hay field and I see some youngsters out there with their four-wheelers, taking a shortcut. Now, in that hay field, there are some dips in that hay field just from the earth that just has some dips in it. Mm-hmm. They go out there on the four-wheeler and they hit one of those dips and they flip over and break their leg or something. Generally, who is liable? Because I'm aware there's a dip out there. So I'm aware of it.
So, but it's not, I mean, that's a little bit different. It's not public property. It's not like a grocery store parking lot. It's not a commercial property. I would, on that situation, I would just go out. They should have insurance on the vehicle itself. You know, it depends on whether they got to it on a roadway or not. Most golf carts, if they're traveling on the road, you're supposed to have insurance on it. Same thing for four-wheelers. So
that's interesting. That is interesting.
And you didn't do anything. I would argue you didn't do anything. That's just the way the land was. It would be different if you went out there, dug a hole, put some hay over it, and purposely made it where they would fall.
Is that what you did, Dad? Is that at 10 o'clock at night?
I plead the fifth. All right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like these people with the mailboxes that, you know, sometimes get knocked over by bats. And the guy who goes out and he puts a little concrete stand up. And then when the guy comes by with the bat comes back and hits them in the head. I think that, I don't know.
I wouldn't take that case.
Yeah, you wouldn't take that
I don't want that case.
Well, so let me ask you, I've got in my notes here something about 4 elements that determine negligence or 4 elements of negligence. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so you have to have a duty. And so when we're talking about a car accident, you know, you're on the roadway, you have a duty to drive in an ordinary, reasonable fashion. So first is your duty. Second is if you breach that duty. So that would be, did you breach it by not following proper safety measures? Did you breach it by drinking and driving? Or maybe trying to run a red light? That would be breaching the duty. And the next one is the person has to be harmed. So you don't just have to breach a duty. Now, you can be criminally for that, but for civil, what we're talking about, the other person has to be actually harmed. So if you were in that car and you ran the red light, did you run into somebody else and actually cause damage to that person? And then it has to be that the damages are related. So where that kind of gets tricky is, what if the person had a prior back accident? You know, he's got to be able to relate that this accident happened because of that person's negligence, not because it happened playing softball a week before or something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
well, is there a way of saying if the existing injury was exasperated because of the accident?
Then that would be fine. Yeah. That would be part of the damages if it exacerbated it. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So here's another question that we've heard before. What is the difference between a no fault and an at fault state? And then I guess, what is South Carolina?
So South Carolina is at fault. So, you know, when you're at fault, it means that you have to prove that the other person was at fault. So how do you do that? Well, of course, a police report. You can get an accident reconstructionist to do that as well. So you have to actually prove that someone else was negligent, that someone else caused the accident. Okay. Off the top of the head, a no-fault state would be somebody like Florida. And a lot of people, you know, Florida's close to here. You might drive there on vacation. Florida is different. It's a no-fault state. So that means you don't have to prove who was at fault. You just have your own insurance. And I'm not licensed in Florida, so I'm just kind of giving you the Google explanation of it. But your insurance would pay no matter who's at fault. And then the other person's insurance would pay that fault when it's a no-fault system.
Are there more no faults or more at fault states?
I'm not sure because I'm only licensed in South Carolina. So.
I don't know if this changes at all. Has South Carolina always been an at fault state?
As long as I've been practicing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
So, wonder, in your opinion, why do we have states that are fault and states that are non-fault?
Well, I know if we went to no fault, that would probably put me and a lot of people out of business, or at least we'd have to switch gears and go somewhere else. I don't want to guess, but I would say Florida, just because of the amount of tourism and the amount of people coming with, you know, maybe that's the reason. I'm not sure. I haven't done research on that. But
there's about a dozen no-fault states, so it's kind of rare.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there, you say there's like 12 no-fault states. Yeah. I know that's not where I'd want to practice law. So.
Wow. So I guess if I'm going down I-95 in Florida, I should not see as many personal injury attorney billboards as I do in Columbia, South Carolina.
I would think not. You know, I haven't noticed. I haven't been to Florida in a while. So I think it probably keeps the rates down.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, so going a little bit further now, somebody gets into a automobile accident and they're not at fault. I'm gonna go both ways. I'm gonna do not at fault. Ryan will go at fault. All right. Okay. We had an accident.
Okay. And it's my fault?
It's your fault.
I don't like that.
It's always
I don't. You're getting old. You got glasses. You can't hear. You're senile. Yeah, let's.
You see how disrespectful the youngsters are today.
He's got more driving experience.
Yes, there you go. Look, this right here.
You know, no. What that means is you're overdue for an accident. That's what it is.
Oh my gosh, man! I tell you,
he's probably more careful when he drives.
Look at there. See, this is my attorney. Go get your own. Go get your own from this point forward. Man. So I'm in an accident and I'm not at fault. What are the things that I need to do?
You need to call the police. So many times people are like, I didn't want to have to call the police. Yeah. We're just going to exchange insurance information. And the problem with that is not properly documented. You just never know. They could give you an old insurance card. They could, to properly document, you need to call the police and have a police report filed.
All right. Let me ask you that. It's same situation. Dad gets in a wreck. It was somebody else's fault. They were going all of 5 miles an hour. The person just bumped into the back of Dad. There's hardly any damage. Do they still need to file a police report, or where's that line at?
If there's any damage to the car, you need to file the police. I would file a police report because the insurance company might deny the claim. So it depends on whether you're going to have to take your car to the body shop or not.
Okay.
What if I sit in the seat and say I can't move because my back hurts on that 5 mile per hour bump?
Well, then you call the ambulance as well.
Yeah. What I want to know is, can I own him for the rest of my life? Financially speaking, that's what I'm trying to get at.
No, he should have insurance that'll come.
He should have insurance.
Yeah. I do. I have more than the state minimum. I know that.
All right. What else should we do?
So if you're able to walk, you should take pictures of the damages. You should make sure you get the FR10 from the officer. Take a picture of that FR10. You have to turn that FR10 into the DMV.
What's the FR10?
Thank you.
That's the police report that they give you on the scene. If you need to be checked out by EMS, call the ambulance and go to the hospital. That's the best way to get into the hospital because you shouldn't have to wait as long if you go by EMS. Plus, you just never know if you're able to drive yourself. Maybe your car's totaled. You might need to take the EMS to get to the hospital.
Okay. We
recommend people get treatment or at least get checked out by EMS or get treatment because you just never know, especially older individuals, if something is really wrong or not.
Wait a minute.
She cut her eyes at you when she said
change who you were representing in this conversation?
I'm just giving you my experience. When you're in a wreck, your adrenaline's pumping. You might not think that you're hurt, but you are, or you could be, and so that's why we recommend people getting checked out. All
right, let's switch it. I hit Dad. It's 100%. It's my fault. What do I do? Am I just out of luck, or do I need to get in touch with a personal injury attorney as well?
No. Well, most personal injury attorneys probably wouldn't represent you unless if you're admitting liability. They're not that I know of. They're not going to represent you on it. You need to call your insurance company and report it. That's the most frustrating thing is when I represent somebody and the insurance company is dragging their feet paying the property damage because the at-fault driver is avoiding their phone calls.
Okay.
So do the right thing. Report it to your insurance company.
Look at
quickly.
That. Ethical lawyer. Yeah.
And you definitely still need to turn the FR10 into the DMV as well.
Okay.
That would be the accident report. Yes. Not our FR10.
Yeah. Hey, we got a couple of those.
Our FR10 would not. That's why we were looking at you a while ago. It's like, you have our FR10?
What does that matter?
Yeah. So that was curious. So, Kelly, let me tell you a story that happened to my oldest son, Ethan, a few years when he was in college.
Yeah, why don't we use him as an example? He's been in way more accidents.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, we need to introduce you to our son. My son, Ethan. Yeah.
our son.
I need to introduce you to my son, Ethan. Ethan has had more than a couple of fender benders. This one time down in Charleston, Ethan was sitting at a stoplight, and this young boy with his mom in the passenger side run into the back of Ethan's vehicle, and it was damaged. It had to go in the body shop. So Ethan went, he did everything. He took pictures. Thank God he took pictures of the guy's driver's license and the guy's insurance card. Thank God he did that, because guess who disappeared?
The at-fault driver.
Yeah, the at-fault driver disappeared. And so Ethan went and he turned in all of his stuff, and the insurance agent that represented Ethan was trying to reach the insurance agent on that card that represented the other person. And months went by. Mm-hmm. Now Ethan's car is going in, his vehicle's going into the shop, but he hasn't heard from the other person. And so I'm the dad who's letting my son handle his business. And it gets to a point to where you find out, you know what? They just haven't had this dance before. They don't know how to dance this dance. And Kelly, I'm not proud to say what I did, but I will say
that guy.
I did not. No, son. We're going to delete that part, okay? But what I did was I got the phone number. They even gave the actual phone number. So I sent a text. I still have it on my phone today. And I basically said, hey, I'm the father of the gentleman whose vehicle you ran into. That's my vehicle. And I basically put in there, I hate to send this text message to you. I said, but my child, my son, I said, who you've run into, I said, he is now suffering all kinds of headaches, and he can't hardly move his arm, and his back is hurting real bad. All we want you to do is repair his vehicle. But if you don't get in touch with your agent by 12 o'clock tomorrow, I promise you, I will strap you with his medical bills for the end of your life. You know, it was incredible. They got in touch with their insurance agent. I mean, before that next day, and everything was fine. But we went months like this.
Well, if you would have called me,
I didn't know you.
I would have told you.
Well, that's your fault. You should have.
I would have recommended in that situation to go ahead and get your own insurance to fix the vehicle. Mm-hmm. You would have had to pay the deductible, but eventually your insurance would have subrogated against his insurance, and you would have got your deductible back. Yeah. It would have been a lot faster. You would have gotten it done right away, and it wouldn't have been as much headache. So a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to make a claim against my own insurance. Well, you've already, the claim's there because you've been in this accident. Just you'll have to pay that deductible, but you will get that back eventually, because your insurance is got a lot more leverage to go after his insurance to get paid back that damages, and they will. They're not just going to let that slide.
Sure.
Right.
At that point, you'll get your deductible back, and it's a lot less painful.
Yeah, I wasn't proud of that moment, but the bear father in me came out. It's like, you know what? Lowlifes that try to circumvent people's good nature just make the world a bad place. So yeah, but thankfully we got that taken care of. And but if it ever happens again, Kelly,
and it probably will, because it's Ethan we're talking about. So.
But
Ethan, if you're watching, Kelly,
but he's in Georgia, so I don't know. Are you licensed in Georgia?
I'm not licensed in Georgia.
So I don't know. You'll never get to meet Ethan, I guess. But I love him. He's my eldest. He's my favorite brown-haired son. Okay, so but that's the way it works. Ryan's my favorite blonde-headed son.
I'm also going to put him in a home. So there's that.
Yeah, we need to talk about that too. All right, for a claim against them.
All right. And I know this one might be kind of ambiguous, but what can people do to prepare for future potential accidents? Like, what can we do? Check
your insurance coverage. Call your agent. Ask them if you have underinsurance. Mm-hmm. That is the most important coverage, in my opinion, because the person who hit you can only have $25,000 in liability coverage. You need to have underinsurance that can cover you, because if you're in a bad accident, you break your leg or you can't work, that's a lot of damages. How are you going to survive? Especially if they don't have, financial planning with you, that could be a big issue. But one thing just to cover them is having that underinsurance as well.
Well, the state minimum is the 25,000, right?
Yes.
So there's a chance that somebody could be driving around without insurance.
Yes.
And then you wouldn't even get the 25,000.
No, you would.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I had non-insured.
Yeah, so everyone in South Carolina who has liability insurance has uninsurance. That
Okay.
would kick in if someone hits you, and whether, let's say they have a Florida policy and they only have 10,000, that would still kick in, or if they have no insurance at all, which does happen a good bit in South Carolina, you would just use your uninsurance.
How many times has that happened to Dave?
You know, I don't know. I know Dave had an accident on the interstate where a bunch of cars backed up and he went into that little rail on the center and it totaled out his brand new vehicle. But I don't know how many times that has happened.
Okay.
But it's just been more than a couple.
Yeah, and it was all uninsured or no insurance or whatever. So, okay. All right. So one of the things you were talking about was checking your insurance. So you would recommend for individuals to work with an agent, maybe not do it themselves, not do it online, but actually have a dedicated agent?
Yes, I would recommend that.
Okay. So do we. That's good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we think relationships matter.
Right.
Yeah, because we don't know what we don't know. And so it's good to get with someone who knows the things we don't know. You think that would be common sense.
Right.
But common sense isn't so common anymore.
And your agent can work with you because if it's a family of 4 and you have underinsurance of 100,000, that still has to be split between everybody. And so working with your agent will know so you could have 6 kids. I mean, whatever you have, you need to have more coverage for more people that could be in that vehicle.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow. That's something. Well, Kelly, we've covered a lot of things here today, and we do appreciate you coming in and sharing this insight with our listeners. But is there anything else that you think people should know about personal injury cases?
Yeah, it can just be a slow process. I try to really do mine as fast as I can, but what people don't realize is before we can even make a demand against the at-fault driver's insurance, we have to get all the medical bills, but they have to actually be done with treating. And so if they have a broken bone or they're treating to get an orthopedic care, that can be a long process. There is a 3-year statute of limitations, so you'd want to file a lawsuit on most cases within 3 years. But, it's not going to be you get in an accident and anything's going to be done quick. Insurance companies just don't move.
So with that statute of limitations, if I heard you correctly, the way I think I heard it, it's 2024. I get in an accident, it's my fault. 24, 25, 26, let's say the middle of 26, 2.5 years later, I haven't heard a thing from anybody. I'm enjoying life. I could actually get something in the mail saying, oh, guess what? Happy day, you're being sued.
Yep.
Wow.
Oh, my goodness.
But on the flip side of that, if you get in that little fender bender where you think everything's fine, and then a year and a half later you find out you got an issue, you can go back and file a claim, right? Or make a lawsuit?
You can file a claim. It's important to have the right documentation because if you're in a fender bender and 6 months later you're like, oh, my back hurts, the insurance company is going to be like, well, you haven't gone to get any kind of medical treatment to establish, that care. And so that's why you need to go to the hospital or at least urgent care or your primary care doctor, and at least document you were in a motor vehicle. These are the symptoms that you're having, so you can relate it. Especially with a knee injury, you might think you just twisted it, maybe it's torn, you might need to get an MRI. So you want to get the proper medical treatment, at least to check you out to make sure and to document it.
And the FR10, I remember that. Get the FR10.
Yeah, their FR10.
Their FR10, not
our
LPL's.
FR10. Yeah, we don't want to get that. Okay, so Kelly, I'm going to ask you a question completely off the cuff, one that you are not prepared for.
Okay.
So let me just notice the look on her face, the way she changed her demeanor's like, oh boy, here it comes. Without sharing names and without the salacious details, what would you say, in your experience, has been your most bizarre personal injury case that you've dealt with and won?
And one. I had one where a tortilla machine blew up on the person. And it was really bad damages. They had to rush him to the Augusta Burn Center. But we were able to not only do workers' comp because he was working, but then we also did the product's liability. The tortilla machine was it was a propane tank, but they had hooked it up to like a regular gas line. So it was like really badly done. So
What is a tortilla machine?
It makes tortillas.
Makes tortillas.
Like tortillas for tacos.
Like I get in a restaurant?
Yeah.
Those little things? Mm-hmm. They blow up?
if you
machines do.
install the gas completely wrong, they do.
Wow. That's, well, okay then.
There you go. There you go. Can you, what is like the payout or the settlement on a tortilla machine?
That was over $1 million.
Holy cow.
No.
Holy cow.
No.
Gracious day.
But he deserved it. He's a friend of mine, and he had burns, really bad burns. Like
He deserved a tortilla machine?
he deserved the settlement. He deserved the settlement because that is painful.
I believe it.
Yeah, like the pictures were intense. Like he was very injured. I mean, but they don't just rush you to the burn center for nothing.
For nothing,
you know?
yeah.
Hopefully he's doing much better today.
Doing great. Yeah.
$1 million helps, I bet. So, yes.
Well, hopefully he's doing much better today.
All right. Well, you got any other questions?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Last question I got for you.
Okay.
What is the single best piece of advice you ever got from your father?
All right. So my dad was is an athlete, and I played sports my whole life. I lettered in soccer and basketball and track and field, and played softball since I was 5, and did gymnastics. And the most important lessons were not when we won, but when we lost. And, I'd come off the field and I'd, just be heartbroken if we had lost a game or something. And he would come up and he'd say, well, did you give it your best? And I would say, yeah, I did. And he was like, well, that's all that matters. And so he's always taught me to be my best, not only on the field, but off the field, be the best person I can be, honest, integrity, and just, every day give it 100% and be my best. So
That was good.
Good deal. Good. Well, Kelly, if our listeners, obviously, we're going to recommend again that they go and vote for you at the Best of, what was that website
Best
again,
of
Ryan?
Columbia.
bestofcolumbia.com.
Columbia.com.
Yeah, and look up.
Find more information about it. How can they find more information?
they can go to burnsidelawyer.com. That's my website. Yep.
And that's how they can get in touch with you.
Yes.
Good. Good deal. Good deal. Well,
So,
Ryan, you want to take us
Kelly,
home?
Thank you for coming in today. We appreciated it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So if you guys want to learn more about Kelly and Kelly Burnside's law firm, feel free to reach out to her. We will put her information in the links. If you want to learn more about the Templeton Group or the My Father Said podcast, we'll also have that in there as well. But with that being said, I'm Ryan.
Hey, and I'm Robert.
And I'm Kelly.
And this has been the My Father Said podcast. We'll see you next time.
The opinions voiced in this video are for general information only and are not specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance reference is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that strategies promoted will be successful.